thank you very much for attending the CREST Pentest Focus Group quarterly panel session in July. We'd like to welcome our attendees, and I will be passing over to Tony UV very shortly, who sits on our focus group, and he will be introducing our panel members today. So thank you very much for everybody for attending. There is an opportunity, if you have any questions at the end of this session, to ask our panel. So please feel free to do that. There is a question pane, so you can type your question in there. So if you're halfway through the session and you think to yourself, yes, I've got this burning question, type it in there and we'll make sure we get that asked for you at the end. So thank you very much, and I'll pass over to Tony. Thanks, Tony.
Hey, Debbie, thanks so much. I appreciate it. So hey, everybody, this is Tony UC. I am the Global Vice Chair for the CREST Pen Testing Committee. And on schedule, we have our quarterly pen testing panel. Today, we have an exciting one. Today, we're going to talk about product security assurance, and we have two great leaders in the industry from two distinct industries. We're going to begin with introducing Sebastian High. Most importantly, Sebastian High, you've had a very impressive background, beginning with your time at the U.S. Air Force. So on behalf of everyone, we thank you for your service. So we want to begin with that note, but we also know that you have an impressive background in building product security assurance efforts at two major organizations. I don't want to distract in terms of take away from some of the accomplishments that you have done, but just for our audiences out there, in healthcare manufacturing, healthcare software development, Sebastian has been the head of application security for one of the largest healthcare organizations worldwide at McKesson. Today, Sebastian serves as the Business Information Security Officer for one of the largest units at Elevance Health. And then, accompanying us as well is from the West Coast is Frank Osborne, an industry leader and currently representing as the head of security at Udemy, equally having, decades of experience in the area of application security, product security. He's been a former consultant himself, and need to be, we have both panelists right now that are going to be speaking on product security assurance. Now, what I wanted to do is set the table on CREST's role in product security, and then we're going to go over and dive into some of the essentials of what is product security assurance, the relevance of pen testing, application security, and things like that. So for those that are not familiar with CREST, especially on the US side, so CREST is an accreditation firm out of the UK, and quite well known in the UK and quite well known, on also Asia Pacific. In the United States, there is a need for product security assurance, right? As there's go-to-market strategies for product manufacturers in medical, in manufacturing, in retail, fintech, and et cetera. There needs to be assurance that the go-to-market strategy doesn't forego product security resiliency. So CREST, as an accreditation firm, boasts this program to be able to ensure that pen testers worldwide are truly doing their efforts in a way that is following a methodology that is threat inspired, that is following a rigorous framework. And so for those of you that are not familiar, please visit crest-approved.org. You can also Google CREST pen testing or CREST defensible pen testing for some of the literature around that. Okay. So now that that's out of the way and we kind of understand a little bit about this CREST-sponsored webinar, we want to be able to go back to our industry leaders to talk really frankly about product security assurance. So let's put on the table the obligatory question of what do we mean? What do you mean by product security assurance? We'll begin with you, Sebastian. If you in your own words could just define what it is and the importance of it in go-to-market strategies.
And good morning to you and the panel and everyone that's listening. That was a great intro. Thank you. So listen, let me just start with, I will just say product security assurance. Quite honestly, I began thinking about assurance when taking over product security for a large pharmacy and health provider technology. We have medical devices that have embedded software, and I'm thinking going through the certification process that's in place in the U.S. for medical devices. The threat landscape was evolving such that a lot of the hospital environments were becoming more open ecosystems. Knowing that, and we got embedded software from everything from cardiology systems, radiology systems, patient care systems. I had to take a really aggressive approach in the context of how do we secure software of all types. So I came up with a tiered, let's just say set of rigor for software, things that let's say supply chain software is less risky to you from a person or personnel safety, people safety. I just think that we needed to look at the entire gamut of software. How do we deploy software? Software is ubiquitous when you talk about it in the context of software. When you talk about it in the context of product, it begins to take shape. Shape meaning, is it a mobile app? Is it a client server, fact client? Is this just running in the background to operate, data operations for the enterprise? Or is this software going out into the marketplace? If so, how is it going out into the marketplace? Is it something we're relying on in FCC systems, FAA systems, medical systems, you name it? Software doesn't take on just this ubiquitous kind of thing when you put it in something that has an expected service. So I started realizing we needed different tiers of rigor based on how we're packaging the software in the context of software. And as we think about the packaging of software, I said, well, we need assurance to the community. We're offering these things called products too. So for the medical community, we need to have the highest set of rigor that we could come up with. Now, we can't break the bank, but we certainly need to make sure that the security quality of software, we can provide assurance that there's a high standard, just like performance, uptime, resilience. When we talk about resilience and uptime, I think I combine those and I come up or had coined the phrase initially in 2011, 2012, security quality, and just said this should be an attribute in the development life cycle. And so, it began there. And I know that was verbose response. I didn't give you an absolute definition because I don't think there's a one size fit all. It depends on the vignette to me when you talk about assurance. Assurance is contextual. So for me,
I think that response was excellent. And what I like about that response, Sebastian, is the fact that it provided some real world meat, especially in the context of what your experience has been in medical in the medical healthcare field right now. Frank, you've been a consultant, you're head of security for Udemy. There's obviously a platform that everyone, thousands, millions of people are benefiting from. I mean, that's a major product there. In your lens, right, as being responsible for the integrity of a product that's going out there for learning and continued education, how do you see product security assurance as a necessity for go-to-market strategies, and how do you define it?
All right. Well, thanks again for the intro, Tony, and for having me in the panel. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, it boils down to trust from my perspective. We have individuals that are leveraging our platform. We have organizations that are leveraging our platform. The organizations that trust in us come from all backgrounds, all industries. And the complexity of software these days is really a challenge. We really spend time working with our engineering orgs to ensure that we're trying to meet them where they're at, and make sure that they in turn understand what the customers are looking for. What is the expectation of software in 2023? right? It used to be a lot easier, right? It used to be a lot simpler. But now, you know, the attacks, the complexity of the systems involved in the processes, the third parties that are involved in the processes, these are all things that we need to consider as far as the development processes. So really, when I think about product application security, I'm looking at, can I trust this application?
Absolutely.
And I want to make sure that the users of the platforms have that level of trust, right? So it is up to us to stay involved in everything from the sales to the customer success processes, just to make sure that we're getting those signals back, to make sure that we understand, you know, that folks do have a high level of trust in our product.
Absolutely. So what I want to do, let me throw up on the screen kind of an agenda, you know, for what we're going to talk about today. So that, I think that was a good intro. I'm going to put this on the screen, and it's just going to basically set the table. So let me throw this up there and share it. Let's begin with you know, I think we'll segue from what you just mentioned, you know, Frank, trust, right? At the end of the day, for those that are listening, you might be a product manager, you might be a CISO. It's about trust. You're rolling out a product that's going to go maybe embedded into a healthcare organization, or you're a SaaS product, right? Through that product, you could have failures in data integrity that could make a physician make the wrong decision. You could have malware being distributed, or a botnet furthering its nefarious goals, right, through that SaaS platform. So before we dive into secure product development efforts and all the tangibles and activities that go underneath that, we'll put that as item number one, and I'll share my screen in a moment. Let's further expand upon, especially right now, you know, obviously from a, you know, industry perspective, we're on the verge of going into Black Hat, you know, one of the largest conferences in the world, DEF CON and security B-sides. Zero Trust is out there, right, as a major headliner. And, you know, it's nothing new in terms of security architecture. Both of you, you know that there needs to be the proper validation of what you trust in an application model. So let's go back to you, Sebastian. Let's talk about, you know, from a design perspective, from a threat modeling perspective or architectural perspective, let's further expand upon how do you, you know, interweave the aspects of trust, like trust into product security, and what are some of the fundamental components of a program, many of which you yourself have led for some of the largest organizations on the planet, that work, that don't work, when it comes to ensuring that trust is factored into the engineering?
Well, it's a culture thing. Thank you for allowing me to expand on this, because I like Frank's, you know, simplistic but factual. You know, trust is definitely key, and at the end state. But getting there is what I'm going to talk about a little bit, and hopefully Frank will expand on it. So the culture, you need to recognize that there's the development culture, there's the business culture, and you got to bring, and then there's the end user, the stakeholders. I looked at everyone as a stakeholder, all right? You're just looking at life through different lenses. At the end of the day, I had to champion absolutes, right? Everybody needs to understand, to get to trust, we have to bake in absolutes. The absolutes in terms of outcomes were the security quality that I spoke to earlier. How do we quantitatively say you should trust this? How do we qualitatively say you should trust this? That's the art and science of secure development, in my view. So here's the science. The science was, we can certainly prescriptively say, if you are a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 application stack, these are the things you will absolutely do. And in doing these things, your security quality must be realized, else you do not pass go. Now, that's painful initially. People need a little scar tissue, but it's the same thing in playing in anything we do. Basketball, you get bigger, faster, stronger. Football, baseball, by going to the gym, running track. So to me, if you didn't have any secure coding background or secure design background, if you were being assigned to development teams that were building tier 2, tier 3 solutions, then it was an absolute that you have secure development training, period, in a discussion, right? If you're just building an app that was going to go out to the marketplace and it was just we're doing surveys with, then okay, fine. You can perhaps maybe throttle up to secure code training down the road. So secure development was an absolute. Number two, secure design was an absolute. Now, where we're going to start in terms of secure design, we won't eat the elephant all at once, was my motto, but we are going to certainly absolutely make sure all operations and components responsible for authorization and authentication at any point in the application stack, you will threat model those things, and we will pressure test that threat modeling with pen testing. I'm not trying to put a plug in for CREST, but that was literally the product security assurance model. So I'm going to pause and give Frank an opportunity to weigh in. If you like, I can keep going. But Frank, you might.
No, thanks for the layup. You know, this is something near and dear to me, because I think that from our perspective, people before things is really where we need to start. And you talked about the culture, which is really important. For any security leader walking into an organization, any consultant walking into an organization, you tend to come in with an architectural reference in your head. You know, how this is how I will attack the problem that I expect to see. And then you get punched in the face as soon as you walk in the door, and you realize that, hey, I need to actually maybe make a pivot here. So really spending time understanding the workflows for your development teams, the challenges that they have on a day-to-day basis, and now taking those components that Sebastian talked about, you know, the solutions that help to aid in secure development and bringing it close to those software engineers and to the rest of the folks supporting the infrastructure, right? These are essentials today, because there is a slew of complexity involved in this process today, and time is of the essence, right? They can only spend so much time working on fixing, on maintaining, right? So making sure that there's clear inventory of all of the assets that you're working with, making sure that everyone understands the goals of the program, the product, the organization. Those all need to be very clear up front. So, you know, really spending time and effort understanding the pain points across the organization. These are key to success. I will say that, you know, sorry, Tony.
No. I mean, I just wanted to build on that. I think it comes to, you know, empathy with understanding functional use and product development, you know, to your point, to both of your points, you know, as security professionals, there's many out there, and I'm sure both have seen, you know, many of them try to act like street cops, right? You can't do this, you can't do that, but being able to empathize with the goals of the product development effort into design. And so we're on principle 1 here on the agenda. We're talking about secure product development with Sebastian Hyde, Frank Osborne. And again, thank you both for being here. Let's build on, let's keep, you know, the train moving, as we say, and talk more deeply about fundamentals of what goes into an effective and successful product security program that helps to, yes, win over the internal customers, right? Product development managers, product managers, overall the business. Let's talk about tangibles. Let's talk about tangibles for a second in terms of activities that make this work. Sebastian, back to you. You have led one of the largest security programs that I've ever personally witnessed. And I don't want to, you know, put that much luster on what you've done, you know, at McKesson, but it was impressive, you know, having consulted for close to 30 years. What you've done is nothing short of impressive. So share with the audiences worldwide today, what are some of the activities, security activities that were, you know, that were game changers, essential in your secure product development program?
I'm gonna give credit to some, you know, frankly, you know that I kind of I adapt based on certain things I gained from my time in the Air Force. So some that know me may say he's a bit, he militarizes certain things, but I do know that successful campaigns were executed well because they had great planning and great buy-in support. So at the end of the day, you might have witnessed, it was a top-down approach. I had a vision. It starts with a vision. You need to be coherent in communicating the vision. And where did I start? The CIO, CTO for the enterprise. Pitch to him, here's what we want to do, year 1, 2, 3, and 4. Get them to actually pressure test what you're doing, because by them participating in the exercise, you're gaining support. Even if they're stripping half the things you would like to do out, that's okay, because you can come back and add it into the year 3 or 4. It's a negotiating technique, if you will. But once you have that exercise, now you have a stakeholder, because they're vested in the success of it. Why? Because you allowed them to participate. So now pulling the community of enterprise architects together was the next strategy. We went to the enterprise architects, which are senior leaders in and of themselves in enterprise. And we say, okay, guys, here's what we've come up with from a vision perspective for secure development, for products. What say ye in terms of we need secure design education? How deep and how wide can you eat the elephant in secure design education and meet your development and your product release schedules? Rather than me, proselytize what they should be doing in my timelines, I allowed them to see what needed to be done, and I allowed them to decide how fast they could eat the elephant in terms of getting there. So we throttled on timelines and said, look, until we get to these certain points, these are the gates. So we're going to have a little bit of extra curriculum on the back end, which we don't like. What we're striving for is the principle of secure by design. What we were striving for is the principle of security by privacy, or privacy by design. Those two principles we needed to bake in slowly, because this was new language to a lot of the architects. But once they understood the context of it, they really, got on board. They lead up the secure design training, and now we're actually moving into the world of threat modeling in the context of their development lifecycle, which 2 quarters ago they were thinking it was impossible to do threat modeling at any rate in their development lifecycle, because they weren't leaving the time to do it, but they saw the importance of why it should be done. So it was sort of taking them through the process, leading them to the water rather than demanding that they drink the water. It was a collaboration. So I'll pause.
That's great. I mean, you hit a lot of great points there. And I like the fact that you did a great job in segueing on the culture thing that both of you touched upon, right? And you started with what we call in the OSI model, layer 8, the executive layer, right? And being able to get that executive sponsorship behind you so that you could make them a part of, make sure that they would endorse the overall product security journey with all those activities that you just mentioned, security design, threat modeling, et cetera. And so for them to understand how all this stuff will translate to a resilient medical product for that respective business, phenomenal. I love it. Frank, back to you. Again, we're talking about essentials and product design. Now, you've been a consultant as well. So you've been on both sides. You've been on enterprise, you've been on the consulting side for some reputable, notable industry consulting firms. And the theme of product security assurance, and right now, especially with Udemy, you have a lot on your shoulders when it comes to resiliency of that platform, uptime, integrity of what is being manifested to both the trainers and the students that are partaking. What are some essentials for product security that are in terms of activities, right? Whether it be threat modeling, whether it be, secure by design, whether it be SaaS, DaaS, et cetera. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, the first place we start is with alignment, right? We want to make sure that we're not in the ivory tower saying you must do X, Y, Z, right? We want to make sure that our product team, our engineering teams, and our leadership kind of understand that we're really just trying to find the balance, right? So finding that balance, organization by organization, that can take some time, right? Because every organization has their own set of goals. and objectives. So we do make sure that we align with the objectives and we study exactly what each team is working on. We have our own objectives as well, but we work around that. But when it comes to the principles, Sebastian hit on a lot of the important ones, which is that secure by design principle. Engineers, depending on the organization that you're at, may have dozens of releases per day. So looking at kind of that ratio, starting with understanding the ratio of release to bug introduction into the process, and then starting to measure that and figure out exactly, okay, where do we need to pull the levers? Where do we need to focus on maybe more training? Where do we not have the right scaffolding to enable that secure design? It's really getting underneath the covers and understanding exactly where those pain points are. Understanding where the data is at is key as well, because that's what we're here to protect, right? At the end of the day, and then it comes down to the detection, right? So you can be limited in the protection capability that you have in your organization, but you should be able to detect what is happening, and then you flow into your response processes. So really, we want to make sure that we have that observability. Those are key principles that you need to have within the application development process. I need to see end to end what's happening. I need to understand the data. I need to understand the inventory of my APIs and all of the components that I'm using to build these services. If you don't have that, it's going to be much more challenging to carry that on and build a trustworthy product.
Yeah. And let me add to that, Frank, is that what I left out before that I think you talked about it, but you didn't absolutely just, say this word. I would say least privilege design, least privilege design was one of those absolutes baked into the culture, because that's not always that's not always something that I think we strive for consciously. I think we talk about it, but we don't necessarily put it into action consistently. So that was another, design absolute. And it was very important to test that in development lifecycle early. And we will go back to the design dashboard, if you will, and do it again if the least privilege principle was not implemented at the start of any architecture. So that's one thing I'd like to just reinforce for those that may be listening. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, this is what we call in the industry webinar gold. So I appreciate both of the commentary. You guys lay down a lot of great things. And just to recap before we turn the page into product risk. So we've been talking for the past 15 minutes or so about secure product development activities in that. We began with zero trust. We talked about essential things like security by design. Sebastian, you just laid down, obviously looking at rights of least privilege and things like that, because as you said, inherently in functional development, there's this implicit trust that happens between development groups and engineers where everyone trusts everybody because they want to get a functional product out. But as we know in security, as both of you well know, with trust comes in, abuse cases that could be abused by malware and threat actors. There's other things that you guys put down. I like the fact, Frank, you touched upon kind of understanding what you're working with, right? Being able to inventory. You said the word inventory your APIs within your product, right? You can't defend what you don't know. That whole adage really ties in well to attack surface management, one of the more modernized words that are out there, right? Understanding the attack surface. Putting a bow on product development, I'm interested, and this is a selfish question, of course, because I love threat modeling, but threat modeling with respect to the programs that you both have respectively built in your past. Could you have built a product security assurance program without it? And why or why not? And if you couldn't have, what sort of things did threat modeling do that you feel that other product security programs that do not employ this activity are missing out on? So Sebastian, we'll begin with you and then we'll go to you, Frank.
as I said before, no, emphatically no. Threat modeling is core, in my view, to secure design. It's the hub of secure design. Otherwise, it's not secure design. All right, that's just that's not just an academic statement. That's a functional reality. Now, so let's talk about threat modeling a little bit. And as I said before, you can't do this activity in a boil the ocean approach. So we took a, eat the elephant in small doses approach. And when we talk about threat modeling, so components that are responsible for authorization and authentication, when you decide what components you want to engineer to meet certain functionality, whatever the business requirements is calling for, pause and do a threat modeling of those components. Again, you're restricting your threat modeling lens to authorization and authentication. Okay, the next phase to me that you add to this threat modeling exercise is IO operations. So in my view, at least, I mean, and again, this, everybody may have their own golden grail, but I'm just sharing what worked for the development processes that were designing software for embedded or to embed in medical devices. The next was IO. So every component responsible for any IO, that was the next stage of threat modeling. So, in our view, in my view in particular, if you can't penetrate those components, you pretty much have a pretty rock solid, stack. So I'm gonna pause and allow Frank to weigh in here. I don't want to diatribe too long because I could.
But yeah, no, but before Frank, you take the torch. For those out there, when Sebastian's talking about IO, he's talking about input output, right? So any routines where the storing data, taking data, processing with it, just to kind of clarify out there. But
sure, thank you.
Frank. So your thoughts on threat modeling: essential, non-essential? How did you guys leverage it? What was the game changers in threat modeling that have allowed for a more resilient, cyber resilient platform?
Yeah, no, it is absolutely essential. I still struggle with organizations that are not taking the time to do this upfront. During the story building of the feature that you're trying to build. This is essential. We all do this all day long, right? You make these decisions and you're analyzing threats throughout your life, to get an understanding as to whether or not I should walk down that dark alley or stay on a well-lit street, right? So when it comes to the product, we really spend time focused on understanding all of the workflows, right? We know that we have this business component. It has supporting infrastructure. Okay, what can go wrong, right? Do we have the visibility that we need across that entire stack to understand exactly what use scenarios or threat scenarios may occur? When it comes to risk management, the last thing that you want to do is have a discussion with a leader, and with intangibles, right? Or what ifs, right? It's great to have those tangible outcomes, and there's a slew of data out there and examples of what can go wrong. So taking that into your threat modeling activities within your organization is key. To educate your engineering teams, but also just to make sure that you are raising the bar, at every release, right? You are always making those improvements. Threat modeling is absolutely essential. I think that in many cases, organizations, especially when they're trying to move fast, are focused on, hey, these are the use cases. These are the good things that we want out of our product, right? But we need to think about these other threat scenarios and just factor those in. What can go wrong? So after you go through the exercise of, this is what I need to build for a successful product, now you need to go back through that. This is a cycle, right? And now the next one after that is, okay, now I need to look at what can go wrong, right? How are people going to misuse my application? Whether you're interfacing with a partner, whether or not you're serving the general public. These all need to be considerations.
It's excellent.
You know,
Well,
Tony,
I think, yeah, go ahead, Sebastian. You have some
you know,
thoughts on that?
yeah,
To
I just
size
simply
them out.
wanted to say this model, to say this. I think the audience that if they're in, large enterprises, maybe someone is asking, well, it's great, but how do you scale, right? And accelerate. So I would say, it's not a one size fit all. Every organization has its own, culture. So I'm not quite sure what to say that'll satisfy everybody. So I'll just say this, that it was a hybrid approach when we talked about baking in secure design and using threat modeling as a vehicle to get there. I, as you know, wanted to adopt PASTA, for example, and certain cultures did, and rather than get righteous around it, I'll admit that we settled on what am I really after? I'm after secure design culture. So I don't want to fight. So for those that's really leaning towards Stride for whatever the reason, I'm calling out some threat modeling frameworks intentionally so that people understand, number one, you really have to have some standards. And so you can have a unified security quality rating system. So it's not just piecemeal. At the end of the day, you do need to coalesce around some frameworks for threat modeling, and I'm offer those up for free. Number two, you need to scale it at the enterprise level. So you get your enterprise architects trained, you let them go train the trainers, number one. So it was the trainer approach. So all of the EAs at the product level, EAs at the enterprise level, now the EAs at the actual, we work on this product suite. It was a tiered approach. So now we're letting the EAs at the enterprise level train the product managers and product architects. All right. And then we're letting the product architects train the actual, I think, lower level, subsystem product solution people, because every product family may have 4 to 50 sub products under this, product family. So that was a, multi-year model, but after about 2.5 years, you had the entire, enterprise of about, I'd say 12 to 15,000 were all technologists. Of those technologists, I'd say at least 7,000 of those people were architects trained on threat modeling. So I'll pause. That's just one way to eat the elephant in terms of how do you do this at scale?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're going to go
that
into
is such a good call out.
Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
Sebastian. Sorry, Tony, I didn't mean to step on you, but yeah, Sebastian, that's a really good call out. Scaling, and when it comes to the threat modeling, there are some complex models out there. I do strive for simplicity because as I'll show my age, but I'm dealing with folks across the spectrum, right? Folks that are just coming in the door, new developers. You have folks that are significantly experienced, and finding something that can bring them all together, something that is simple, something that helps them to still execute with the velocity that the organization expects to get the new features out to customers, to start recognizing that business value. These are key components. So I do recommend that you look for a simplistic approach. And I think Sebastian alluded to this, giving them, bite-sized chunks, right? Maybe you're not going to get there overnight. It's going to be evolution to get to where you want to be. And you have to keep measuring to see exactly how much there is left to do. So really good call out. Stride and Pasta, these are really good options. There's others. You just have to find what works best for your org. And that could differ by team, especially when you're talking about microservices, et cetera. Each team may want to adopt a different approach. As long as it's getting done, that's what I'm looking for.
I good points there. I think that simple is good, right? But it shouldn't detract from the mission, right? Sometimes oversimplifying things. And I was going to, as you guys were speaking, we both know that in product security assurance programs, many people apply the checklist approach, right? So you think of us, if we represent a retailer, right? And they're manufacturing point of sale devices. If our product assurance program is just simply, the PCI standard and that's it, right? Then it becomes a checklist. And oftentimes, when we go to conferences and we hear about a lot of these webinars, people take these, oh, I got to do threat modeling, I got to do security by design, and they look at it like a grocery list, right?
Yeah.
They don't think about operationalizing those activities into the fabric of the engineering of the product. And so this is where, there's really from my lens, two types of individuals. Those that are like, okay, let me just go ahead and get this out of the way so I can say that we're doing PCI, that this is, high trust aligned, that this is HIPAA compliant. But there's a difference between that and actually operationalizing some level of cognitive threat intel into some of the things that you just mentioned just right now, like who is my threat actor? What are they after? Where am I susceptible, right? You're having to take abuse cases and align to use cases. I like the scaling point that was mentioned, very, very, very appropriate. And I don't think a lot of our listeners out there really understand, going back to you, Sebastian, McKesson is like multiple companies within one, company. It's a $400 billion behemoth. Okay. So when Sebastian began talking about like different types of approaches for using threat modeling, and it's always a religious debate, and we're going to get into risk, which is another religious debate in security. It's about finding what works good for that product development team, right? Every culture, and then, Frank, you touched upon this just right now with your last commentary, is that you're going to have be able to make sure that you want to introduce something that's commensurate to that respective product team. The last thing I want to mention there is maturity modeling. So oftentimes people want to do product security assurance, and maybe they want to embrace threat modeling or dynamic application testing or pen testing. And what is success, right? You're not going to get to benching, 350 out of the rip, right? You're going to work your way up to that. So it's important to be able to have some level of KPIs or maturity models that coincide with some of the activities that you want to employ in your product development program. We're going to switch to risk management. So at the end of the day, now we're talking about risk reduction, and we talk, making sure that there isn't, fines from the FDA, that you have a go-to-market strategy that isn't being thwarted by regulatory, SEC cybersecurity requirements or FTC requirements and communication and things like that. Let's talk about risk management in terms of, from your lens, Sebastian. You can open us up here. I know you're a risk nerd, and there's no shame in saying that. So lay down some risk nuggets for how you have had success in extrapolating product security risks in the programs that you have led, and how you've manifested that risk to product owners.
All right, so thank you for that. I started off, probably this shows my age, and I think it might show my age. I started using something called Dread. And Tony, let me talk while you tell everybody, if you can, what Dread is, maybe after I finish. But I evolved because I realized that risk methodology was great when I was thinking about things through the lens of the technology stack and impact to the affected user community. As I grew and mature in my role, and thought more broadly, I started saying, okay, let me distill it down to risk management. To me, came down to maybe these four things. And it didn't matter anymore what, design methodology or threat modeling methodology you did, because I could bring it all back to these four. Financial impact to the organization. And whether that's rank 1 or 4, it doesn't matter. I didn't rank it. I just simply enumerated this, and I let my C-suite decide where it fell in terms of the risk stack. The next was regulatory impact. Again, that covered all of the PCIs, GDPRs, HIPAA, high tech, what you name it, regulatory. I flattened it and said, what's the regulatory impact? If there's a failure in this product. All right. The next one was what are the contractual impacts? This is not just going out to a single, hospital group. or healthcare provider. It's going out to hundreds and thousands of facilities. So if there's a compromise somewhere in terms of not meeting a contractual performance requirements, what's the impact? Again, that we check that box, but it also could have financial implications. And finally, what was brand impact? So when I think about, do I want to do business anymore with this organization because of ABC event? You know, was it worth to you? You know, so that was kind of the way I at least set the table around the context of risk management. I let the C-suite decide the weighting of those 4 boxes, if you will. And then we applied those boxes to every product family and all of the products underneath each product family. And that throttled my secure design rigor for me. So if you were building software for medical devices, guess where you looked at this risk matrix, and it gave me the hammer I needed to make sure that the product developers, the product managers, they were aligned to a common understanding of how our C-suite and board thought about risk, right? It was no longer up to how they felt that day. So, and I could apply that consistently to all product families. And that's how I got the common measures in place for risk management. I'll pause and throw it over to Frank.
Yeah,
Sebastian,
so
I mean, you hit on something there. I need to follow up on, and it was the financial impact, and I think that's where we need to start as security leaders and assurance leaders. Look, at the end of the day, we're in a business to make money, right? And we need to be very clear with our leadership. We need to be aligned and understand exactly what are we comfortable with from a loss perspective, right? Now, perfect world, we don't want to lose a dime, right? But the reality of it is we're in business, we have to take risk. You have to have some sort of acceptable level of risk and losses. So I do like to use risk management frameworks. I'm a big supporter of FAIR. I think that being able to get to the point where we can now quantitatively have those discussions, where we can really step through the threat actors, we can really speak to the losses of productivity, the losses of confidentiality and what that means. And Sebastian hit on, hey, you know what, can I actually trust this product after a breach? Now, I think we all know that it's very transient right now, right? The news cycle, hey, maybe there's a breach today and tomorrow people have forgotten about it, but there's some of us that don't forget, right? Especially those that are in charge of dealing with third-party risk management, right? They're going back, so it never really truly goes away. So I think really focusing on what you're willing to lose, right? Setting yourself up for success and making sure that everyone is on the same page. And to what Sebastian said, letting the leaders make that decision. It is not for the security leader to necessarily make that decision. We need to all be on the same page as far as what is acceptable from a loss perspective.
Yeah, I took it as my job was to operationalize the leader's decision. I want to say, though, to the audience, I left out one, and I apologize, you wouldn't know them, but if you are generally in a healthcare industry, there was one other dimension to add to risk, and that was the attribute of patient safety. So, I said financial impact, contractual SLAs, brand, and regulatory. The other shoe was patient safety. So that rounded out, how we thought about risk-based management for our, products.
Absolutely. I mean, yesterday I was at a FBI event here in Atlanta at Georgia Tech Research Institute, and I had a moment to address the crowd there, and many people in healthcare, they think, on the security lens, and I'm glad you brought that up, Sebastian, because patient lives and patient safety trumps, patient data every day of the week, and oftentimes, security professionals coming into the space, especially in healthcare, they're so driven by PHI that they forget how security of a product, a manufactured medical device, or software application could actually affect the patient's life, for whoever is using that product. So I'm glad you brought that up. And listen, again, it's worth mentioning here, as a moderator, I pride myself that I'm basically the metaphorical highlighter in this conversation, highlighting a lot of the PowerPoints that you guys have been dropping down. So legal risk right out of the gate, understanding product risk as in the lens of the product owner. Sebastian, you began by talking about that. Frank, it shows your true risk nerd colors when you were talking about quantitative, desires for risk analysis. I love it. Also a big FAIR disciple myself, definitely. Make sure, for the audiences out there, there's a lot of, clouding, no pun intended, of like, the methodologies that are out there, like FAIR and Octave. And sometimes I see that they're kind of miscategorized as threat modeling, right? And risk assessment is risk assessment, and then there's a model of threats is separate, right? And they can work together, pasta. But the differences is that you guys shared all really kind of become cohesive in terms of understanding what's going to cost the product money. Now, Sebastian, you mentioned dread. Now, I will affectionately say, and maybe you did show your age a little bit there. In modern day conversations, there is the expression "dread is dead." It is a risk mnemonic that was invented for. It's a risk categorization, much like Stride is simply a threat categorization mnemonic. Dread is a risk categorization mnemonic. Very helpful, very easy to get started. But going back to the conversations on threat modeling, ask yourself, for Stride, invented in 1990s, is modern day threats reconcilable to a immutable, mnemonic? And then just ask yourself that. If modern day threats in 2023, as we're seeing the evolution of threats, and now with ML-based threats, AI-based threats, is it reconcilable to an immutable mnemonic? If in your opinion it is, adopt it, use it however you need to. But if it's not, you really have to ask yourself if you're truly building a model of threats. But I'll get off that horse and let's go into the last area of incident response. Now, this is something I threw out here as kind of something to talk about here, because product assurance is usually looked upon. Product security assurance is something preventative. You have secure design, you have pen testing, right? That goes into making sure that you have a resilient product. But what about engineering or thinking about, being able to have incident response or detective reactive mechanisms so that if there is an incident, you are engineering your abilities to have high integrity forensic information so that you can figure out what happened and so forth. So let's begin there. Sebastian, in terms of thinking ahead, right? As a head of security, application security for McKesson, where I've seen you bake in multiple different activities. Can you share a little bit about how the considerations for the worst case scenario, there's an incident into the product that you've taken the time to do threat modeling, dynamic analysis, static analysis, SCA, and beyond. What sort of things were you thinking about in terms of like, being able to have a product that is conducive for proper forensic, post-breach analysis, incident response?
The operation of the application stack, depending on where it fitted in the food chain of regulatory requirements, we built in extensive logging capabilities. In terms of resilience for response and recovery, I'd say I did, and I was fortunate that I had leadership that was very big on prevention. So I would feed threat feeds into the product development, design, and requirements portion of the life cycle. Now, we didn't take the kitchen sink approach. We did the things that were pretty active, and we knew that the threat landscape was always throttling, so you can't really get in front of it. But if we can build in awareness in our design and requirements development phase, an understanding of what the universe is really doing and how threat actors are really behaving, we felt that we would not experience, the kind of, response requirements that maybe the rest of the planet was doing. So maybe, on our part, we were somewhat aspirational or arrogant. I don't know, you decide. But I would say that we built extensive logging so that we could understand exactly in a timely manner where we're experiencing an event, how that event took place, what were the pivot points, and we can, do we have alternate controls to maintain the application so it just doesn't, we don't have to do a shutdown. That was the main thing. We never wanted to have to bring anything down under any circumstances. So I don't know, does that help at least answer
absolutely.
some of the question, or should
I?
I?
Absolutely.
All
Frank,
right.
what are some of your takes on this topic?
No, I mean, I think that what we've been discussing throughout this this meeting here really now dovetails nicely into the incident response process, the threat modeling and the risk management. Throughout those activities, practitioners can really identify where they need to focus in that incident process, right? Where are those weak points, and do we have, as Sebastian highlighted, the detection capabilities to identify those? Now, you've highlighted, containment and eradication. These are all core to incident response, but it starts up front, right? When we're talking about things like APIs and now having a service mesh, something that can now control exactly what talks to what. It's great to let someone in your front door, but you may not want them to go room to room, right? So you really need to make sure that you have those controls up front so that you can minimize the impact should an incident occur. And now we're really just trying to focus on how do we go through the process of response? Do we have the capabilities to detect and respond in a timely manner? Does it align with our contractual obligations? Does it align with regulatory obligations? If we have a breach, we're talking about things like GDPR. How do we respond in a timely fashion and make sure that we can get that answer that we're all looking for, right? Because at the end of the day, you have this ticking clock. 72 hours. So you really have to make sure that you have an understanding as to whether or not there has been exposure, and this turns into a much larger event. So containment is key, but everything up front needs to happen so that you can be successful at this stage.
I know we're running out of time, but I'm gonna just say simply, we did a lot of tabletops in the design phase of product development. We gamified not threat modeling, but we gamified pen testing. We got it to the point where, a lot of teams were looking forward to pen testing because they wanted to be able to brag that you didn't find anything. So at the end of the day, I think that you can flip this into something to incentivize your architects and your design and community and your technologists at large by gamifying some phases of your development lifecycle. So and from an operational perspective, the rest of the organization participated in a lot of tabletop scenarios where we would be creative so that we would then take those outcomes into our design and requirements again. So, that's where we got the resilience attribute, starting to mature in our, thinking about product requirements. That's it.
That's huge, Sebastian. I'm a big proponent of maybe test-driven security. We can get as much pen tests on an annual basis as the company will allow us to, right? Based on the budget. But I also like to have, bug bounty programs, et cetera, always just banging against the application, especially if you have a high rate of change. It's a lot different when you're talking about embedded devices, things like that. You may not have those opportunities, but if you do have the opportunity, continuously test. This is something that we really need to bake in. As we move forward, as Tony mentioned, machine learning and AI and all of these things, the attackers are getting the best tools as well as the businesses, right, at their fingertips now. So this is only going to increase the complexity of how we do the modeling, how the items that we're focused on protecting the organizations against. So I really think that teams should be looking at not doing the once a year test, this needs to be a regular process. You really need to understand what's happening in your
Absolutely.
application and how it's
I want to
changing
do
daily.
parting thoughts really quick. And, as the vice chair for the pen testing subcommittee for CREST, I would be remiss to not get your parting thoughts on, a pen testing firm that is using, like, CREST has a responsibility of accrediting firms worldwide that really espouse threat-inspired pen testing, right? A high rigor of going through a framework of understanding protocols being used, trying to match abuse cases with use cases, but everything that's threat-inspired. So more than just simply your out-of-the-box, generic pen testing, outfit. How have you seen a difference in ordering pen testing services, for decades? Have you seen a difference on, these types of products that are out there that are being offered? And how valuable is it as a buyer who's built product security assurance programs to have a firm that really aligns with the CREST mission, as an example of threat-inspired pen testing? Sebastian, we'll begin with you. Closing thoughts.
Well, I mean, absolutely. There's value in that because it simply adds another level of trust. When we started talking about trust, I'm going to use Frank's, simpler definition of product assurance. It adds that degree of trust. It's added trust to our deliverable.
So we're getting some freeze up. Some Frank. Oh, there you go.
That's the bottom line. So I think we're just not looking for pen testing. We're not looking for pen testing for pen testing's sake. We're looking for quality-based pen testing. I'm looking for things that will actually, help us actually design better product outcomes. So, the CREST certification to me assures me as the buyer, I'm purchasing a service that I can depend on getting outcomes that I can utilize and bake into my development life cycle.
Absolutely. Frank, closing thoughts on this?
Yeah, definitely. Look, I spent a lot of time in my career, pen testing myself, and had the luxury of working with a lot of great testers throughout the industry. And this is kind of near and dear to my heart. I think that, Tony, you highlighted the checkbox approach. And sometimes it's just, okay, we got to get this pen test out there, and okay, we can say that we did it, but what did you find, right? And the testers only have a limited time to actually bang away at your application and your infrastructure. So you do want to find reputable organizations that have a track record of performing regular testing and delivering high assurance for the organization. So I'm really happy that we have organizations like CREST that can be doing that accreditation to give folks that trust, because this is another vendor that you're leveraging. This is third-party risk management. So if your product is serving the masses, you need to make sure that you're using someone trustworthy so that you have that longevity in the game, right? So I think that this is something that I've seen organizations push off, but this is something that needs to be upfront. Test-driven security, making sure that you're spending the time to pick the right vendor, and I know it could be challenging if you're a startup versus a larger organization, but you really need to find those reputable organizations that you can work with. Start where you can and work your way up based on your budget.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, both of you. This, again, Webinar Gold, Webinar Platinum. You can find this content on the CREST YouTube channel. Please visit crest-approved.org for more information on CREST. Sebastian, Frank, two rock stars within the security space, decades worth of experience in leadership, and it shows with the testimony that you guys have shared and imparted with us today. For those that are out there, please share this video with many others. I think it'll provide a lot of insightful benefits for those that are tackling on building a resilient product security assurance program. Debbie, thanks to you for coordinating and putting this together, and looking forward to meeting up with you both at at a future point in time in the future, so we can get together. I appreciate the time. Thanks so much, Sebastian and Frank. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Nice
you very
meeting you, Frank.
much. Everybody have
Nice
a great rest of the day. Take care.
Thank you, Debbie. Bye-bye.
You too.